Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Welcome back in. It has been a bit. So glad to be back. We have a big show for you. We are going to talk. It's an NBA playoff prediction show. We're going to break down every single first round matchup, go over the play-ins, go over the first round in the West, the East, go over a little bit of the WNBA draft that happened last night. Big basketball show. We're also going to give some predictions further into the NBA playoffs, as well as any other big news that happens during the show. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen. That way you, me, everybody else around the world can see what you had to say. You can control what we talk about on the show. If you leave that message with the tip and donation, we can talk about whatever you would like. All you need to do is go to that link on screen right now, gsmcpodcast.net, and leave that tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give, and we appreciate you guys for watching. But like I was saying, today is going to be a big NBA show. We are going to start it off in the Western Conference today. We're going to do a whole segment on the Western Conference, break down the matches we do know, talk about the seeding, what I expect to happen. Then we'll do the East in the second segment and dedicate our third segment to all of the play-in games. Play-ins start tonight. The Lakers and the Pelicans play at 7. We'll talk about all of that. And then in the fourth segment, we'll talk about the WNBA draft. But like I was saying, the first segment, the NBA Western Conference predictions. The Western Conference is set. It has been basically set for quite some time. We knew the teams that were going to be in there. They were just jockeying for position, especially at the top there. You had your top three teams in OKC, Denver, and Minnesota, all jockeying for that number one seed in the West. At the end of the day, Oklahoma City edges out the other two to get that number one overall seed. An incredible season for a team that young. You know, you have Shea, you have Chet, you have Jalen Williams, you have all these guys that are super young and promising, building up a really, really strong team, strong foundation for years and years to come with plenty of assets to build around them. That team's going to be very good for a very long time, and they're already the best team in a very, very, very strong West. Very impressive season for them. We're going to wait and see on who they play. They're going to play the 8 seed, which could be any of those play-in games. So we'll wait and see exactly who they are playing. The second seed in the West is going to be the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets we're also going to wait and see and play. We'll know who they play after tonight. They will either play New Orleans or the Lakers. The winner of that game will go on to play Denver, the reigning, defending champions of the NBA, the team that has the probable MVP in Nikola Jokic, and a team that seems kind of unstoppable. They might not be the 1 seed, but they seem like a pretty much unstoppable team right now in the West, and that's in a very, very talented Western Conference. One of those two teams will play Denver, but we're going to start this off by breaking down the two playoff matchups that we do know for sure. We'll start with Minnesota, the Timberwolves taking on the Phoenix Suns. Minnesota is the 3 seed, Phoenix is the 6 seed. The Suns come into this matchup, they have all that preseason hype. You know, they bring together this big three. They trade for Kevin Durant at last trade deadline, pair him up with Devin Booker. Then they go and get Bradley Beal from the Wizards. They have this haul. It didn't work out exactly how they would have liked it to. Bradley Beal has been in and out of the lineup all year with injuries. It hasn't been a perfect season for them, no matter how you slice it. You take a look at the rest of that roster down the line, it's a little weak. They've done stuff to improve it. You know, you have a lot of okay depth. Depth was the big issue for them because they were right against the salary cap with just those 3 guys, basically, that being Beal, Booker, and Durant. But they can score, and they can score with the best of them. You know, you have these 3 superstars, any of which can go for 40-plus any night, any given night. It's a really tough matchup for these teams, but if there is a team that's going to be able to take them, it's going to be one of the best defenses in the league. It's going to be a team that has incredible perimeter defense. Rudy Gobert anchoring down there at the bottom, probably going to be the defensive player of the year. Although, as we talked about on Wednesday's show, I think it should be Wemby. Rudy Gobert down there, locking down the post, probable defensive player of the year, and then incredible outside defense as well. It's going to be a really, really tough series. The Suns are a team that want to play at a fast pace. They want to put up points. They want to speed you up. They just want to score because they have the ability to put up 140 points a game. Where on the other side of the coin, you have a team like Minnesota who they can also put up points, but their defense is tops in the league, one of the best in all of the NBA. If you go by defensive rating, it is the best in all of the NBA. So it's kind of a battle between offense and defense. The Phoenix Suns, again, if you go by offensive rating, have the 10th best offense in the league, while they have, not a great defense down there. Still in the top half of the league, but at 13, so kind of a middling average defense. But they have their strengths. They're elite at one thing, and it's opposite. Generally, in these matchups, we see it all the time. The defensive team tends to take these. And that's not to say that a team like the Timberwolves, who have the 17th ranked defense by offensive rating, can't score, right? You have Anthony Edwards, who's electric, can also put up 40 points on any given night. There's a chance that Karl Anthony Towns is back. I know he was coming back soon, making a return. You add him back into that mix, that offense immediately gets better. You saw the difference of when he was before he got injured and after he got injured. It's going to be a fun series. These teams both kind of have a big three. The Suns' big three is much bigger names, but they are older players, generally. I'm very excited for this series. I have the Timberwolves taking this one in 6 games, just because I think their defense is going to be able to propel them past this round. Anthony Edwards is going to be able to shoulder that load on offense, and with Karl Anthony Towns being back in the lineup, he won't have to do everything on his own. It's not to say he can't. He has the ability to do this. But you get those two guys together, they can cause a lot of havoc. They were battling for that 1 seed in the West with 2 incredible teams for a reason. Now, Rudy Gobert's track record in the playoffs has not been the best. I'm well aware of that. You go back to his time with the Jazz with Donovan Mitchell, it was a very similar situation. Elite defense down low, not the greatest offensive option, but it stopped him from getting past the second round. They were pretty consistently able to get into the second round, but past the second round, they could not compete with those top teams. And I think it's going to be a similar story with the Timberwolves this year. This team is better than any of those Utah teams that he was on with Donovan Mitchell. Nothing against Donovan Mitchell. Incredible player. We'll talk about him in the second segment. But he's kind of a liability on offense in the playoffs. And maybe something turns around with this new team, with with scenery, completely new stars alongside him. But as it stands right now, it's not the greatest spot for Minnesota to be in. I do think they can pull this series out. It's not going to be an easy one. The Suns have the star power. We went over it. Beal, Durant, Booker. Those guys can go off. You talk about Booker and Durant, just those two. That's almost impossible to guard. Durant on his own, these guys are scoring machines. And it's going to be a question of who can control the pace of these games. I do think that Minnesota has the ability to play in a faster paced game, while if Phoenix is having to be slowed down, it's going to cost them a lot more than if Minnesota is sped up. So for that reason, I have Minnesota advancing out of this round. It is going to be tight. I have this going 6 games, Minnesota taking it 4-2, moving on to the second round. The other matchup that we do know in the West is the Mavericks taking on the Clippers. The Clippers are the 4 seed, the Mavericks are the 5 seed. The Mavericks have been one of the hottest teams in all of the NBA after the All-Star break. They make that trade for Daniel Gafford, lose Davis Bertans, and make a couple moves at the All-Star break. Their defense improves dramatically. That, again, the Mavs and the Suns are kind of built similarly. The Suns have more of that top-heavy star power, and that's not to say anything against Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, because that is an insane offensive duo. That is one of the best offensive duos in all of basketball. You have Kyrie Irving dishing it out to Luka, who can hit a shot from anywhere. It is so much fun to watch. Their defense has improved. Luka is making a serious case for MVP. I think he definitely has tossed his name into that ring, probably second, maybe first. Maybe he was able to surpass Jokic there. It's a tough road. Everything seems to be pointing to Jokic there, but Luka deserves to at least get second place for what he's done down the stretch. His triple-double, his 30-point triple-double, his scoring, everything he does is incredible. The Mavs have been probably the hottest team in basketball down the stretch of the season, and they take that momentum into Los Angeles to face the Clippers. A Clippers team that is pretty healthy for what they've been in the last couple seasons. You know, Kawhi is still here. They have James Harden, got him at the beginning of the year. Paul George is here as well. They've started to find their rhythm. When James Harden first got there, it wasn't looking good. It took about a week, but they figured it out. Him on the floor together, his ability to dish the ball around, get it to open guys is something that they desperately needed. You still have Westbrook coming off the bench. You still have it's still a pretty deep team over there. Westbrook is quarterbacking the second unit, and Kawhi is still an elite defensive player who can lock down just about anybody. This is a tough series, because if I'm looking at it on paper, I'm thinking I take the Clippers because they have Kawhi, they've got Paul George, they've got James Harden, they've got Russell Westbrook. But in a lot of sports, as we know, it comes down to who's hot at the right time. And right now, the Mavs are the hot hand. The Mavs are the hot team in the NBA. I think I'm going to take the Mavericks here, have them go Mavericks in 7 games. I think that both of these Western Conference series are going to be really good. So are the ones at the top. I think there's some potentially really, really good matchups. All 10 teams in the West are above 500. You talk about a team, and we'll get into this a little bit in our third segment when we talk about the play-in games. Every single team in the West is stacked. It's a crazy, crazy difference to look at where the 10 seed in the West would be if you look at the Eastern Conference standings. And speaking of the Eastern Conference, we will break down those matchups coming up next. But yeah, to recap the West, what we know right now, we'll go over the play-ins in a bit. But the 1 seed is the Thunder. They'll play any of those play-in teams. The 2 seed is going to be the Nuggets. They'll either play the Pelicans or the Lakers. We'll find that out tonight. And then the 2 matchups that we do know, I've got Minnesota. I've got Minnesota over Phoenix in 6 games, and I've got Dallas over Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Clippers, in 7 games. Coming up in our second segment, we will be talking about the Eastern Conference playoffs. We'll break all of that down. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I'll blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way. waiting to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello, welcome back everybody to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we are breaking down the NBA playoffs today. We just finished breaking down the Western Conference. To go back to that first segment if you want to hear about that. In this segment coming up, we are going to talk about the Eastern Conference. I think every single matchup that we know so far is really intriguing. The Eastern Conference has some of my favorite matchups in the playoffs. The 1 and 2 seed, we'll talk about that as well. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. When you leave that tip or donation, it'll have you leave a message. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, everybody else around the world that is watching to see. If you do leave a message, you can control what we talk about on that show. On the show. Anything you would like, any burning question, any thought, we will have a discussion about it. All you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, that link on screen right now, and leave a tip and donation. We appreciate anything that you do give, and we appreciate you guys for watching. But like I was saying, we are going to talk about the Eastern Conference playoffs. We're going to break down the games we do know. We're going to talk a little bit about the Eastern Conference standings as well. So let's just get right into it. The 1 seed is the Boston Celtics. We've known that for quite some time. The Celtics have had the best record in the league, the best record in the East forever. They've run away with this 1 seed. It was never in doubt. They are going to play the 8 seed, which again could be any of those play-in teams. The Knicks have the 2 seed, and what really was interesting, because you have a situation where Milwaukee was holding that 2 seed for forever, and then they go through this awful stretch down after the All-Star break where they couldn't catch a break. Giannis goes down in a game against the Celtics down the stretch. He is expected to not play in the beginning of their playoff series. We'll get into that and how that affects their series in just a second. It's kind of a disaster for the Milwaukee Bucks, and it sets up for really bad news for them. They go ahead and they trade for Damian Lillard, but the Knicks are able to slide in. They are down Julius Randle, OG Anunoby as well. They sneak into that 2 seed. They're going to play either the Heat or the 76ers. Whoever wins that game tomorrow will move into New York, play Jalen Brunson and the Knicks. We just talked about how strong of a Western Conference it is in what's a really weak East. You know, you have the Celtics, and then you have everybody else. Everybody else in the East is separated by less than 5 games, that's at least in the playoffs. You know, 1 through 7, 1 through 8 even, I believe, are really close together. You know, a couple of shots go the other way in some of these games. A couple players play one more game instead of resting. Maybe we have completely different matchups, completely different 2 seed, completely different play-on teams. It's really close in the East, and it's not great. It's jumbled up. It's the Celtics, and then it's everybody else down here. So, Celtics are the favorite to come out of this. It would probably be a disappointment. No, it would definitely be a disappointment if the Boston Celtics did not get out of the East this season. Their starting 5 is leagues. It's like a super team. You know, you have Jason Tatum. You have Jaylen Brown, these 2 supermax players. You go out and you get Kristaps Porzingis. Excuse me. You go out and you get Kristaps Porzingis. You go out and you get Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday, who just signed another extension. 4 years, a bit of an overpay, but whatever works to get you that championship. Boston is so desperately needed for some time now. It's in Derek White in there as well. You know, Al Horford coming off the bench. That team is stacked top to bottom. It is an incredible roster that they're put together, and it shows. They have one of the best defenses in the league. They have one of the best offenses in the league. You take a look by offense, they have the best offensive rating, and defensively, they're second. They're the only team in the league to even be close to those metrics together. And there's a reason that they're up there. There's a reason that they're title favorites. There's a reason that it would be a disappointment and honestly a kind of failure of a season if they didn't win the East. Unless something happens, I'm knocking on wood here, unless something happens with injury, it would be a disappointment for them not to get out of the East. They are by far the best team there, but let's look at let's look at these matchups we have, because like I said, these are really, really intriguing matchups. They might not have the same level of, they might make a deep run, but they are really intriguing matchups as we go into the East. Milwaukee is taking on the Pacers. Milwaukee, without Giannis, at least for the beginning of the series. There's a chance he'll be back. I think it depends on how well they start the series against the Pacers. The Pacers, if you remember, had one of the hottest starts to the season. They were up there in the East. They cooled down around the All-Star break, and they've been quietly heating up down the stretch again. They are a 6th seed here, but you match these two teams up. They've had some really, really incredible battles this season. You remember back to the tournament, the NBA in-season tournament. There was some beef there. There was the whole fight between the Bucks and the Pacers for the ball after Giannis went off against them in that one game. The Pacers have won 4 out of the 5 times they've played. The Pacers have kind of had their number. It's been a really fun series. There's a little bit of beef there, which always makes it more intriguing in the playoffs. You kind of got a dream scenario in these playoff matchups in the East. If you're looking to get entertainment value out of this, you get, already some kind of beef between the Bucks and the Pacers there. They had that fight earlier in the season, and it's going to be fun to watch. These teams, it's not like they hate each other, but something boils over. It's always more intense in playoff basketball. Something might occur. There's always that chance of that. It's going to be really, really fun to watch. But outside of that, these two teams both play the same kind of team. Play the same kind of style. We talked about in the West the opposing styles of Minnesota and Phoenix. How Minnesota is defense and Phoenix is offense. Both of these teams play the same. Both of them don't have great defenses. The Pacers, if we look by defensive and offensive efficiency, have the 24th best defense. The Bucks have the 19th. But then when we go to the offensive side of the ball, the Pacers have the 2nd best offense and the Bucks have the 6th. So this is going to be a high-paced, high-scoring game. I mean, you can just go back and look at the scores of their games earlier in the season. I mean, 142 to 130, 140 to 126, 126 to 124. They're putting up at least 250 points a game. These teams are scoring in droves, putting up bucket after bucket after bucket. If you like that kind of basketball, this is going to be the series to watch for you. I think in a series like this, especially with how hot the Pacers have been down the stretch and how cold the Bucks have been, and missing Giannis, and that's not to say that Damian Lillard, who has been really good without Giannis this season, he's been able to step up and take that role like he did in Portland, putting up 30 points, 8 assists a game. It's not like he's slacking off. He's playing great. It's just the defense is not there without Giannis. And the defense already wasn't there with Giannis. But without him, they don't have that big presence on the inside that's deterring people from driving a little bit. Giannis is really an underrated defensive player. And that's not to say that he doesn't get his love on defense, but he's not talked about as one of those scary people to go up against on defense, or at least he hasn't been recently. He's still the Greek freak. He's still this huge, long guy that kind of like kind of like the way that Wemby is on defense, can disrupt you from halfway across the floor. He has that kind of length. His wingspan is incredibly large. It's really, really cool to see him play defense. But he's going to go up against a team that has one of the best offenses in the league, and Giannis is not going to be there, so they're not going to have that inside presence. They have Patrick Beverley, who's always a pest, but he's not going to single-handedly win you a game. He's going to be annoying, he's going to be intense, but it's not the guy that you want anchoring your defense. My goodness, I apologize. He's not the guy you want anchoring your defense. When you have a guy like Tyrese Halliburton who's getting his shooting stroke back, you have Pascal Siakam, who they traded for. The Pacers are a really, really good 6th seed, and I think without Giannis, at least, I'm expecting he's not going to play for the first 2 games at least. I think the Pacers will split those 2 games, and then Giannis will attempt to come back. He's not going to be 100%. And I think the Pacers are going to be able to take this series because Giannis isn't there. If Giannis is there, if Giannis plays 5 games in this series, I think they can win. And I think that's the limit. I think he needs to play 5 games in this series minimum. Now, there's always a chance it doesn't even go 5. But I think that Giannis needs to be playing for 5 games for the Bucks to have a chance. Because Dame can steal a game or 2, but they're going up against a team that kind of just matches you. And Tyrese Halliburton can go shot for shot with Dame, especially this season. Both of them are putting up very similar numbers from deep. It's going to be fun. This is the offensive series for people that love offense. It's going to be so much fun. Giannis will come back. I have the Pacers winning this in 7. I think Giannis will come back after 3 games. Something happens, they go down 2-1, Giannis comes back. That's the thing I'm picturing in my brain. Gets it to 7. It's just not going to be enough. The Bucks are a very, very good team, and it is disappointing. They go out and they get Damian Lillard. I mean, they still have Chris Middleton, who is a really solid second option over there, and now a third. If he can shoot the ball, they'll have a shot. But it's really tough not having Giannis in this series. It's a really bad break for a team that kind of went all in. And they have at least another year of this, but they don't have that many assets to go get another guy. And there's some people on expiring contracts they're going to lose. It's tough. I have the Pacers winning this series in 7, and the other matchup. This one is also a lot of fun. You have, again, 2 pretty solid teams. 2 teams that kind of came out of nowhere. You have the Donovan Mitchell Cavs and the Orlando Magic. The Magic, every year there's that one team that comes out of nowhere. Last year it was the Kings. They had that whole breakout season with De'Aaron Fox. Paolo Banchero is going off. That team is so much fun. They're pesky on defense. They're physical. They play hard. Cleveland is big, and they went on that incredible run in the middle of the season. You have Donovan Mitchell, you have Darius Garland, you have Jared Allen, you have the pieces. They had this last season, and then they ran into the Knicks, and it was just a brutal matchup for them. They just got out physical. They got bullied down low. They need to be able to be the bully, and the Magic aren't a great matchup for them. Like I said, the Magic are a physical team. I do think that Cleveland can take this. Cleveland was put in an opportunity where they could have gotten a 2 seed, but instead they purposely lost the last game of the season so that they wouldn't have to face the Sixers, so that they could face the Magic. They lost, they faced the Magic, and that's what they did. So they wanted the Magic. They need to win this game. They looked at the matchups and they said, this is the team that I want. We're going to lose seeding for this. We'll play the Celtics in the next round for this. It's worth it. They wanted the Magic. They get the Magic. They need to win this series. For them, I think they can do it. I think it's going to be a lot tougher than they think. Like I said, their biggest weakness last season against the Knicks is they were getting bullied down low. Julius Randle absolutely dominated them down low, and hopefully they learned from that. They didn't really make that many changes to their roster. Maybe they've made changes to the scheme, maybe they're going to make a change on their offensive or their defensive game plan, but they need to be able to control the paint. Whoever in this matchup between the Cavaliers and the Magic can control the paint or control the down low area is going to win this series. I have the Magic taking this series in 6. Like I said, I think all 4 of the matchups that we know for sure are really, really good. I'm super excited for these NBA playoffs. I think they're going to be incredible. I've got the Magic in 6, and I have the Pacers in 7. We'll see what happens in the play-in coming up in our next segment. But winning the East, I've got the Celtics. Winning the West, I have the Nuggets. So Boston, Denver in the finals. Jokic, Tatum, that'll be a fun matchup. In our segment coming up, we're going to talk about the NBA play-in tournament that starts tonight. The Western Conference games happen tonight. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we've just finished breaking down the seeding and the 2 playoff matchups that we do know in both the Western and the Eastern Conference. If you want to go back and hear my predictions, go check them out. Very, very intriguing matchups in both. I am a big fan of both. I think my favorite matchup is actually the Pacers and the Bucks, but all 4 of these matchups are going to be so much fun to watch. I'm locked into the NBA playoffs, but tonight marks the beginning, of the NBA play-in tournament. The play-in tournament started just a couple years ago. I'm a big fan of. I know not everyone is a big fan of. I really like it. Not only does it give you more playoff games, which I'm always a big fan of, more playoff games and more basketball, but it also helps, I think, with tanking. You had players like Joel Embiid come back earlier because they didn't want to be in the play-ins. Now, that didn't end up happening. They are in the play-ins, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but we're going to actually start in the West, because the West, they play tonight. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation in the link. There will be a spot for you to leave a message. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. Once you leave a message, I'll see it, you'll see it, everybody else around the world watching this show will see it as well. You can control what we talk about with your message. Any burning questions about sports, anything you'd like to talk about, we will talk about here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. All you need to do is go to that link at gsmcpodcast.net, that link on screen right now, and leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything you do give, and we appreciate you guys watching. But like I was saying, the NBA play-in games, they start tonight. The Western Conference games start tonight. The first games is between the Pelicans, New Orleans Pelicans, and the Los Angeles Lakers. If you go look at the lines right now, New Orleans is favored by 1.5 in what's a really interesting game. So the winner of this game, for the way that the play-in works, the 7 and the 8 seed, they play each other. The winner of that game becomes the 7 seed. They go and they play the 2 seed, which in the West would be the Nuggets. In the East would be the Knicks. The loser of that 7-8 game will play the winner of the 9-10 game. So, the 9-10 in the West, Golden State, Sacramento. Whoever loses that game between Golden State and Sacramento is eliminated. That's an elimination game. The winner of that game goes on to play the loser of the 7-8 game. So, the loser of the Lakers and the Pelicans plays the winner of the Warriors and the Kings. And then the winner of that game becomes the 8 seed. And they have the right to go to OKC and play the Thunder. That is how the play-in works. It's a little bit confusing, but it makes sense. It puts more... It doesn't give the same weight to being a 9 and 10 seed as it does to being a 7 or 8 seed. I think they did a really good job with it. But that's another conversation for a different day. Let's break down these matchups. First game of the night is going to be between the Pelicans and the Lakers. The Lakers, obviously, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. They were in a very similar situation last season. 7-8 seed game. They go in this run to the Western Conference Finals. It's going to be tougher road this time. I've heard some people say, hey, lose this game on purpose. If you're the Lakers, you don't want to go up against the Nuggets. Remember what happened last season against the Nuggets? They got thoroughly handled. It wasn't really much of a contest. You have, but that's not a good plan. You know, you never want to purposely put yourself in an elimination game. You want to give your best. You want to make it to the actual playoffs. No one remembers you. Oh, the Lakers, they were a play-in team that one time. No, you need to make the playoffs to call it a successful season, I think. And in a stacked West, it's not a good matchup either way. It might be a better matchup against the Thunder, but it's not a great matchup either way for any of these teams. I do think that the Lakers are going to be able to pull this out. They have more experience. The Pelicans have been in the play-in the last couple seasons. They have a healthy roster, finally. Zion's back. He's playing good basketball. Brandon Ingram just came back. He is starting. He just came back. He's working his way back into the starting lineup. CJ McCollum is there. They're finally healthy. It's been a couple years. They finally have their core healthy and ready for the play-in/playoffs. This is their year to do something. And I don't think I just don't think they match up very well against the Lakers. You have Anthony Davis on the inside, kind of canceling out Zion, but that should be a fun matchup to watch tonight. You have the shooters on the outside. It's gonna be a good game. I think the Lakers will pull this out because they have experience. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, championship experience. This team made a deep run last season. They have playoff pedigree, and I think that's what's going to push them over the top in this game. The Pelicans are still a young team. You know, they're teetering on the edge of not being a young team anymore, but this is their first real year. This is their first year where they're healthy, and you can never count on healthy seasons. So the Pelicans, I expect to make the playoffs. I do. But as far as this play-in game goes, I don't think they're going to be able to make it past the Lakers in this one. LeBron James is going to do enough to carry them past it, move on to that second game, play the Nuggets in the second round, in which I don't think they're going to be able to deal with that. That is going to be, again, much like it was last year. I don't think this Lakers team is as good as it was last year either. So I don't think it's going to work out. You know, that'll probably be a 5-game series again, Lakers Nuggets, but that's too far out in the future. We'll talk about that series tomorrow, as well as the other play-in series in the West. But the other play-in game tonight. The other play-in game between the Golden State Warriors and the Sacramento Kings, a rematch from the first round of last year's playoffs first round. That was a really, really fun playoff series. I love this Kings team. They took a step back this season. They're not as good. They have the same core. Domantas Sabonis had an incredible season this year. He's been carrying the team. De'Aaron Fox got a three-point shot, but they haven't been able to win in the clutch like they did last season. And that's going to be their downfall in the playoffs. Maybe it'll be different this time. It is in Sacramento. Golden State obviously has Steph Curry. And they have, just like I talked about with LeBron James, they have that playoff pedigree. I want to say that Sacramento wins this game because I feel like it's the end of that Golden State run. Draymond Green has been a headache all season. Klay Thompson was demoted to the bench a couple times. He lost his shot midway through the year, and then he was just atrocious. It's going to come down, I think, to if Klay Thompson can shoot, and if Sacramento can find that clutch gene that they had last season. I'm going to pick Sacramento to win this game. It's going to be tight, it's going to be close, but I do think they're going to be able to pull it out at home. I think that's the big difference here. Golden State, I know it's not a huge road game. You know, you're just going, 3 hours up the coast to Sacramento? But it's still a road game. You're still going to the opposing team's arena. And I think that Sacramento's going to be able to pull it out. And that sets up a matchup between the Pelicans and the Warriors for that 8 seed. I love this Pelicans team. And I think that this Warriors team is just not at the place that it needs to be this season. They need to they're running out of gas. They're running on fumes. They kind of picked up some stuff. They kind of kicked into gear near the end, and they have the ability to do that at any time because they are still on the waning end of a dynasty. You know, the dynasty might be over, but there's still that same core that was a dynasty there. You still have Steph Curry, you still have Klay Thompson, you still have Draymond Green. They still have that championship experience, so I wouldn't be surprised if they won any of these games, but I do expect them to be the odd man out. I think the Pelicans, sorry, I just got it all wrong. I think the Pelicans and the Kings, I think that's going to be fun. I think the Pelicans will take that. Like I said, the Kings just haven't been clutch, and the Pelicans are a very, very good team. They have those 3 stars. They're all set. It's very, very fun to watch. In our 8 seed goes to the Pelicans. They're going to play the Thunder in a battle between 2 really, really young teams. That'll be very exciting if that does end up happening. We will break down those series when we know for sure what they are. We'll break down more about the NBA playoffs coming up next. We're actually going to do the Eastern Conference play-in games next. Those come in tomorrow, but we'll break them down tonight, the 9-10 and the 8-7 matchups now. Really intriguing matchups, at least between the 7 and 8 teams. I think those two could really cause some havoc in the East. But we'll break all that down coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with me through that break on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we have broken down the Western Conference playoffs, the Eastern Conference playoffs, and the Western Conference play-ins. In this fourth and final segment, we are going to break down the Eastern Conference play-ins, talk about the Heat 76ers and the Hawks Bulls, who I expect to come out of that, who I expect to go to the 7 and the 8 seed. and if they can make some noise in the playoffs themselves. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. Your question, your message, your opinion, whatever you would like to say is there broadcast for everyone around the world to see. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you would like to control what we talk about, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to talk about the Eastern Conference play-in games right now. Excuse me. Wrong one right there. Eastern Conference play-in games. Eastern Conference play-in games, they start tomorrow, and I'm actually going to start in the 9-10 elimination game, the Hawks and the Bulls, because I don't think this one matters too much. I think very clearly the two best teams in the play-ins are the Heat and the 76ers. I expect both of those teams to make it into the actual playoffs. You talk about the Hawks, they don't have Trae Young. And that's really, if Trae Young was here, I'd give him a shot, and that's nothing against DeJounte Murray. I just don't think he has the ability to carry this team. And we've seen it. It's fine. This is not the Hawks season. They might be back next season, might make some moves. It might be time to blow them up, but I do think they can get past the Bulls. The Bulls, this is one of the drawbacks of the play-in system. I just talked about how much I liked it in the West because of how strong the West is. All 10 of those teams deserve to make the playoffs. Maybe you could even extend it down to 11 with the Rockets, but only 10 teams can make it. Only 8 teams can actually make it. But in the East, it's a little bit of a different story. You have the Hawks and the Bulls, who probably shouldn't be in the running here, but they are. I think Atlanta will win this game. I don't think it'll matter much, because the much more interesting game, and the one that I'm very, very curious to watch tomorrow, is between the Miami Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers. The Miami Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers, we talk about two teams that took very different roads to get here. The Sixers are a team, they have a superstar in Joel Embiid. A guy, although he is injury prone, is a top 5 player in the entire NBA. Won an MVP last season. Very, very good. He has an injury. He's out a lot of the season, and the Sixers kind of fall. They make a trade to go get some shooting. Tyrese Maxey steps up, and he's been that number one option for them in lieu of James Harden now being a Clipper. They go get Buddy Hield as a second option shooter, and now Joel Embiid is back. Joel Embiid is back from his torn meniscus. He comes back, has a very, very quick recovery, really. Comes back in a little under 2 months. A guy that's been injury prone, ready for the playoffs, trying to get them out of the play-in tournament so he can get a little more rest. He was unable to do that, although coming back a little early. It's going to be fun because the Heat, we talk about different roads to get here. The Heat do this every year, right? They did this exact same thing. Excuse me. The Heat did this exact same thing last season. They make a run all the way to the NBA Finals. They go up and they have Jimmy Butler, who's a different animal in the playoffs. Doesn't really try in the regular season. Saves all his energy for the playoffs. And it's not just Jimmy Butler. It's the entire Heat team that kind of turns it up in the playoffs. Bam Adebayo is the guy that carries them in the regular season. But then you have your shooters. They always have at least one other guy. It might be Duncan Robinson, Max Strus last season. Tyler Hero is always there. Their shooters always tend to heat up in the playoffs. No pun intended there. They always tend to hit it up a gear. They always tend to make their shots more at a really, really impressive clip. If you go back to last year's playoffs, they were shooting at like 50% from 3. That is not sustainable. That's not something you should expect. And yet the Heat tend to do something like that all the time in the playoffs. Jimmy Butler is going to be able to propel them against any team they play. Going against the 76ers, I think they might I think, you take a look at matchups coming up. The Sixers, I don't know if they want to play the Celtics. I think they might prefer to play the Knicks, and I'm sure both of these teams prefer to play the Knicks. But I don't expect either of them to try to lose. You have super duper competitive teams that I expect to get in, and you never want to put yourself in a place where you could just not make the playoffs entirely. Again, we were talking about that with the Lakers. But the Heat have kind of been a thorn in the Celtics side for quite some time, and the Celtics have been a thorn in the Sixers side for quite some time. So I think the Heat are going to. I think the Sixers are going to win this game. They're going to do their best to do anything they can to not play the Celtics, and that's what this game was for. This game is to not play the Celtics. And I'm very, very excited for it. I think you get the playoff heat against a healthy Joel Embiid, a fully loaded Philadelphia roster with shooting finally. They can space the floor, get Joel Embiid his touches inside. I'm very excited to see what that looks like. They haven't had this kind of spacing since they went up against the Raptors and Kawhi hit that shot to break their hearts. This feels like their chance. We talked about the East. I think both of these teams have a real shot of making it to the Eastern Conference Finals because of how weak the East is. You go and you look at the schedule that they'd have to go through if they're the 7th seed. You play the Knicks, then you play the Bucks or the Pacers, both of whom can't really play defense. And that's not to say either of these teams are an easy out. But the Knicks are injured. The Bucks and the Pacers both have terrible defenses. And it's not... And then you play the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, most likely. Or some other surprise team that makes it out there. But it's going to be... I think... honestly, excuse me. The winner of this play-in game is going to be the team that faces that makes it to the NBA, the Eastern Conference Finals, and that's not something that I should expect usually. But in a conference as tight as the East, you go look at the standings. All of these teams were separated by less than 4 games. The Knicks were 50-32. They're the 2 seed. The Heat are 46-36. 4 games. Every single one of these teams is separated by 4 games. These teams are very, very, very similar, and the Heat have this ability to turn it on. The Sixers are getting their superstar back. Both of these teams should be up above that play-in line. They just had outstanding circumstances, in the season. Stuff happened that they couldn't expect, or that they did expect and they just deal with. I think the winner of this first play-in game between the Heat and the Sixers has a legit shot, is the team that I am going to pick to make the Eastern Conference Finals on the opposite side of that bracket. And I think that's crazy. I love basketball. I love playoff basketball, and this is why. Chaos. We didn't get that much chaos in the NCAA tournament. Maybe the NBA playoffs can provide us some of that chaos that I've been waiting for postseason basketball all year. Like I said, I do think that the Sixers are going to win this first round, this first game. I think a motivated Sixers team, Joel Embiid, the shooting on the outside, the Heat might need a game to wake up. But I think the Heat have been a thorn in the Celtics' side. So even if they do have to play the Celtics in the first round, they might give them a little bit of trouble. I don't think they'll end up winning, but I think the Sixers will end up winning this first play-in game, taking on the Knicks. And like I said, going all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Same thing with the Heat. Whoever wins this game, I think, goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm very excited for these games. NBA playoffs start tonight, or play-ins start tonight. The Western Conference play-ins, they start in just about an hour and a half. Very, very, very excited for the NBA playoffs to be here. Very excited to be back on the show, Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be back here, same time, same place tomorrow, talking about all the big news in sports. Football, NFL mini camps are back in session. We'll go over the big news of that, as a lot of teams started to report this week. Some wide receivers did not. What that means for contracts. All that and more coming up tomorrow here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Jeremy Lapidus. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that